Right, finally, welcome back to another episode of Into the Valley. It's been a tumultuous couple of weeks, really.
Mm.
I had my illness where I pretty much lost my voice completely, which meant we missed the Coventry game. Obviously, some pretty unfortunate, tragic incidences between as well, which we will talk over a little bit as well. And you,
I've been ill,
yeah,
and then
you've been ill. You were at the Borough game, and then
yeah,
busy plans. It's
yeah, it's
been
been a
one of
while.
those weeks, and then I've finished it off with being up in Scotland over the weekend, meaning we're filming tonight. But we are going to be back to our normal schedule now. So video out today, and then going forward, got some really quite exciting plans as well over the Christmas period. So shall we quickly? I think just quickly go over some of those kind of games we missed. I think probably starting with the Coventry game.
Yeah,
I think it's a game we all went into knowing that realistically it was a incredibly tough game, especially off the running in which we were going. Had the early hope.
yeah. I think like when you're watching that game, you're sort of fully expecting to be up against it. You're away from home against the flyaway team in the league.
Mm.
On top of that, they scored bucket loads of goals. So when we went 1-0 up, it was a bit of a shock. It was sort of like, wow, okay.
Is this going to be
Can
one of our performances?
Well, yeah, and also it's one of those where we are pretty good. Not so much recently, but in general at the start of the season anyway, we're very good at once we get ahead is shutting up shop and actually keeping it
Mm.
very tight. Against a team like Coventry, I think this season it's almost impossible to do that against them, especially at home. And obviously that showed eventually in the game, and they end up going on and scoring 3 in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it was just one of those games. So I'm glad that we at least had our little moment in the game, to
Yeah,
be honest, and it gave that little bit of hope.
yeah,
But coming out of it, I didn't feel awful coming out of that game, albeit obviously it carries on that run of form, which is the more concerning thing as kind of times going on.
mm,
And it is breaking that kind of rut. But of all the games we thought we were going to do it in, and it was, look, I think it was one of those games where when the third goal went in, it kind of put the nail in the coffin. But we did have a competitive edge. We looked a little bit. There wasn't that capitulation maybe that we've seen over weeks prior,
yeah.
and it was a step in the right direction. Still, albeit still frustrating that it was just adding another loss to that run.
Yeah, exactly. But I think before the game, we did a little preview and we said like it'll be a minor miracle if we go away with anything in that game. And I think for most fans, they anticipated us to lose the game. But at the end of the day, it was one that we sort of had. You'd call it a free hit in a way, wouldn't you? And if you ever go away from that scenario, especially in the form that Coventry are in, they're beating everyone comfortably at the moment. So, yeah, it was one of those, and we moved on from it quite quickly. I think we just wrote it off, and we knew then we had Portsmouth coming up, obviously, after that. And then we all obviously know what happened that day, which was obviously a tragic event that happened.
And I think
Uh,
moving on to that, I mean, as I say that day completely.
Football becomes it doesn't matter on days like that. The football becomes absolutely irrelevant. You've got when you look at Charlton as a club, and I know every club will sort of feel like they're a family, and the supporters will always rally together when things like this happen. But you really felt that sense of community and that sense of and also it wasn't just Charlton fans, the whole football community came together, and I think that was really, really nice to see.
I think it's one of those moments that with all the division in football, I think one of the things that it's just made me, as I say, it makes you step back and realise, and actually seeing football come together, and we've seen it with the tributes at the home game, the next game, which obviously you were at, were incredibly moving, and
Yeah.
I think just seeing football, any rivalries, any competition put to one side, and just realising actually what is important and what, unfortunately, as I say, was such an incredibly sad and tragic event, which then equally went into the Birmingham game. I think hats off to the clubs as well.
Yeah, Middlesbrough fans
Show
were
their
brilliant,
respect. Yeah,
brilliant on the Valley. They paid their full respects, and obviously Norman was he was like a proper fan, like one that had been going for 30 plus years. He was iconic in terms of what he wore, his headphones, obviously, and things like that. So it's one of those things. I think he was the sort of character that you, even if you didn't know him, you felt like you sort of knew him because of like his image, and you'd seen images of him, and people talk about walking past him in the away end and not really ever having spoken to him, but just like feeling like they knew him. which it just shows what a sort of impact he had as a fan.
Mm.
It's quite rare to have those sort of fans at clubs. Obviously, you do get those sort of standout fans, but
And I think every club has those
yeah, they do,
moments, don't they?
they
And
do.
they're the memorable ones.
So I think that's why it was such a shock actually when it all came out that it was him because he's sort of an iconic fan for Charlton as a
Mm.
club.
Mm.
And as you mentioned, actually being there at the Middlesbrough game for the tribute that we paid to him, there was some lovely touches. Obviously, the Charlton badge with the headphones over it, that sort of thing. But I wasn't ashamed to say that I teared up when Dave Lockwood was doing this sort of tribute to him before the game. You could hear in his voice he was struggling to keep it together, and it just shows actually what it means to supporters, and when stuff like that happens, it does really affect us. And like you said, fair play to all the other sets of fans. Birmingham again, like paying tribute. The referee during the game in the Middlesbrough game, stopping the game on the 30th,
and just allowing
just having that moment to really just actually take a step back, think it's more than just football at that stage. So yeah, tragic, really horrible sort of thing to happen. But I do feel like the club has really gone above and beyond to sort of honour his name, keep it as sort of his legacy alive, which is really, really good.
No, definitely. So yeah, I mean, moving on from, as I say, awfully tragic there, and moving into that Middlesbrough game, I think it was something there that realistically that day was about that.
Yeah,
Quickly going into the game, I mean, it felt like as games go, it had a bit of a feel of Borough were really, really in control of the game. You could tell it was another class team we were up against. I think the biggest fear was that capitulation that we have in us, and that was happening
yeah,
again. And I think it's maybe a few too many times we are seeing that this season, especially of late, where it's the reaction to going a goal down, and I think something that we're maybe struggling a little bit, or especially up to this point, struggling with. But then the second half comes out in that game, and I think we actually then really showed us again that what we are about and what we have in our locker.
yeah,
Because I thought second half we came out a completely different team,
yeah.
and
We did. I actually was like prawn sandwich brigade on Tuesday, so I had really nice view of like that from the halfway line. So I had a really sort of interesting take because usually I'm in behind the goal. We sit in behind the goal, so you still get a good feel of the game and how it's flowing. But when you're right on that halfway line, you can really see how the game flows. And that first half, we got absolutely run ragged on the wings. Every time they had so much space to run in behind us, and we were really getting outplayed in the midfield as well, which has always been my sort of concern for probably this run of games where we've been sort of losing heavily. I feel like we've been overrun a little bit in that middle of the park. And that's why actually those changes at halftime really did change the game around because we were getting overrun. But it was funny. I turned to my boss because obviously I went for work, and just before halftime, I said, "Oh, if we can keep it at 1-0, it's going to be interesting." And then we conceded that late goal in the first half, and that's what we've done that far too many times this year, where we've made it almost a hill too far to then sort of chisel our way back into a game.
yeah, and I think that is it. It's that capitulation, or a really important points where you need to go in 1-0 down, recoup, and then come out. And we're not allowing ourselves that. So when we do get back into games, and actually we're looking at games and going, okay, we're getting a foot on the ball now, we are playing better, we have just left ourselves just too much to do at that point.
And by the way, Kaminsky played out of his skin in that first half. He made some bloody good saves, and he actually kept us in that game. We could have been probably 3 or 4 down in the first half, which again is something that has happened to regularly in the last few games. So 2-0 down, obviously at halftime is a tricky one, but we made those changes, and Fuller and Anderson coming on really did change that. And I really feel like that could, especially Fuller getting a little run in the side where he's got no fear. He's one of those players that's going to run, and he made it really tricky. All of a sudden, those Middlesbrough defenders were sort of like, "Oh, we've actually got a defender.
Yeah.
You've got a player here that's going to run at us and take shots on." And he had one shot going top corner. The keeper made a good save. Obviously, we've got the goal, Apter coming on. Again, another dangerous player that's got a point to prove. So we've got those players that are hungry to come off the bench and actually make an impact. And Anderson's another example of that. He's transformed himself in the last couple of games. We'll go on to how he's performed in like sort of the latest game against Brum, but he's one that I think has come in again with a point to prove, and he's putting hard tackles. He's really running his socks off, and it's actually making an impact. But yeah, we got the goal for Apter's cross, and obviously they scored their own goal. And at the end, we were really pushing. And it wouldn't have surprised me if we had gone on and nicked a goal. And
It felt like one of those games
we
where we
were.
might, and
Borough didn't look like they were going to do anything, and we looked like the team that were going to get another goal. But I think we ran out of time.
I think that was it. The unfortunate, if there was another, it's the classic old adage, really, isn't it? If you had another 10 minutes when you were playing like that, he's kind of highlighting that side of us maybe leaving it a little bit too late in games or leaving ourselves with a little bit too much work. But I think you're completely right. There's players, and I think Anderson's one that I personally have probably over the last 12 months had a much more critical eye over. And maybe he is showing in these games why he is an important cog in that machine and actually brings something that I will always have question marks over his technical ability. I don't think he is at the level technically, but you don't always have to be. Sometimes you can be.
Some of the most effective players that sort of play that role of like breaking play up and being hard tackler, they don't need to be that gifted in terms of their passing on the ball, because if they can do that part of the game, which is a dirty sort of part of the game, where you've got to fly in and be sort of full-blooded, you then can actually compensate for the lack of sort of natural footballing ability and actually just put everything into sort of the tough side of the game. And that's what he's doing.
Yeah,
It's
and I think what he brings and what I think there's probably certain teams he works better against, but especially those really technically gifted midfields. I think the problem we've had with that kind of Doherty, Coventry setup is they may harry a little, but they sit deep. They're not the most dynamic duo. And what someone like a Karoy Anderson brings is he does bring that little bit more energy. He's incredibly athletic. And I think if you can put that real high press, which a Nathan Jones system is all about that. If you can put that on those technical players, they will start to make mistakes. And if we can get in those games and we can keep them tighter, we will then get the opportunities in games. And that's what we were so good at early on in the season and what has dropped off. And we've just allowed teams to start playing through us, making us look a little bit silly at times. And we've lost a little bit in that kind of 5-6 game run. We've lost a little bit of the identity of what we are, and I think that then starts to seep through the team. You look at defensively, we looked a lot more shaky, and actually what the last few games, albeit they're not the results on the board, especially with the Borough game and the Coventry, it's still no points at the end of the day. I think both those games started to bring a little bit of that identity back and a little bit more of that kind of what we're about, in my opinion, and I think it shows that if we can do that then against what are the slightly lesser teams, because all these teams we are talking about in these last few runs are predominantly teams right at the top end.
I would say the performance in the second half against Middlesbrough, and then we're about to obviously go on to the performance against Birmingham, we're starting to see an improvement in terms of the performance level, but also maybe Jones realising that he's got to tweak that line up a little bit to make things work in terms of where we're at now. We need the real sort of grifters in there, and the players that maybe can, like your Fullers, your Apters, Tanto is stepping up a little bit more now. The players that can actually create a bit of a spark as well and actually like run at people, because that's what we need in order to get ourselves back up the pitch. Because unfortunately, the isolated sort of figure of Leeburn. The other thing is, and well, I want to go on to this actually a bit more in the sort of Birmingham game, but there was a moment in the Middlesbrough game where Campbell sort of had a 50-50 in the Middlesbrough box with the goalkeeper, and he pulled out of it, and it led to the second goal. And I think it's something that we'll sort of go on to, like I say, in the Birmingham game. But when he scored his goal against Birmingham, I think the fans are getting a little bit twitchy again about how much effort he's putting in or how much he's committing to certain things. And that's maybe something we can talk about. But there's definitely a few players that are being highlighted as maybe like on the verge of being swapped out, and that's what we're starting to see happen.
Well, and I think Nathan Jones to certain players is pretty fiercely loyal, and I think he does have
Campbell,
he has his core group. But I think what we have seen in the last few games is definitely that loyalty is not indefinite, and at some point he will give other players an opportunity, and if they step in and also make their mark, they will become his new more loyal players. And I think it's probably a perfect segue now to move into the Birmingham game, a slightly longer introduction due to the break we've had. But let's move into that. I mean, it's a game, I got to see little parts of it. I was up in Edinburgh this weekend, so I didn't get to watch the ins and outs of the whole game. But I think it seemed to be a game that was probably in some ways what we would expect by going away to Birmingham, who, especially at home, are probably one of the toughest
I
fixtures you're
think
going to have.
I think they've lost one game, and I think that was to Hull fairly recently, but in like 40 or something stupid.
But they've also decimated some teams.
Yeah.
It's kind of put four past them, and especially with the confidence of where we are and the kind of results we've had recently,
Could have gone badly.
it could so easily be another game like that. And I think going into it, I mean, I'll let you take a little bit more of the lead on how you felt generally overall the game went.
Yeah, I mean, so the way I would sort of say it went was the first part of the game. I think naturally we expected Birmingham to have a lot more possession, and I think that's the way it went. They've got quality players. They've got Gray, who was playing, I know, Saudi League, but he was on big money out there. He's played at a really high level. He's a great player, dangerous, and he ended up hitting the post very early on. They had Cochrane had a strike from distance that Kaminsky sort of parried.
It's a bit, yeah, it's quite suspect, because one of the things I looked over afterwards, and I watched the most extended highlights I could find, so it showed a few more of the kind of in between ones, and that for me, it's a shaky moment.
I think he'd hit it from distance, to be fair, and I think Kaminsky wanted to just make sure he got something behind it.
It was that awkward bit right in front as well, but still,
it's the ones that if you try and claim it, sometimes it can squeeze through. So maybe that's what he was thinking. But yeah, so you had that. Then we obviously get to the goal where we sort of defended fairly solidly. Obviously, I know they hit the post, but we'd been fairly solid. And then the defending for the goal was a bit disappointing, because it felt as if Clara had just so much time to just loop it into the back of the net.
I thought the strange thing when I watched it back, the most bizarre part of that is it didn't look like either the person in front or behind jumped. It just even Clara himself didn't really seem to jump that much.
He was sandwiched, I think. Like he had Leslie was in front of him, and then Ramsey tried to sort of put him off a little bit and get to him. To be fair, Clara's an absolute monster. He looks like Frankenstein. Like he was head and shoulders higher than everyone else in that box. So maybe it was just that he's an absolute freak and he's managed to just lump his head on it.
And it seemed to take an age to go in the back of the net. It was just looping over.
Strange.
It was a strange. It was a bit of a bizarre goal, because I say normally you'd have a bit more competition to him.
I think with that, the disappointing thing is that we're very good at defending sort of crosses into our box, and that sort of defensive part of our game is probably one of our strengths. So to concede that way against Brum, I mean, I can take it if Stansfield scores a screamer or Damari Gray whips one from distance. So that was a bit disappointing, but I didn't, to be fair, that was the moment where I felt, okay, we need to keep it tight. And we managed to keep them out for the rest of the half, which I think was very, very important, because again, we were able then to sort of reset. And actually, when we came out for the second half, we looked good, actually. And I think Jones probably had told the players, like, we've gone in at 1-0 down, but we're still in this game. I've also forgotten to mention the Leeburn miss in that first half, and I think fans are getting a bit tired now. I think he has had a lot of chances now, and I have had a bit of sympathy for him, because even like when I watched him against Middlesbrough, and I sort of felt as if he was a bit isolated. He did his best to like take the ball under control, and he's got quite a good touch. We always say it, like for a big guy, he's got a good touch. He does get the ball down well, but he either lacks having anyone around him to play it off, or when he does get those chances, he's a little bit rash, and that's exactly what we saw with that chance, which was literally all he needed to do is keep it low and hard. And
I stand by what I've said about Lee Brain for a while, which is I've probably got frustrated way quicker, and I think there's little glimpses of a really, really good player in there. I think what has kind of happened with him, I still stand by, I think he desperately could do at this stage in his development going out on loan. And I'd look at, for example, Mbik, Kanu at the moment, who have gone out on loan, have done a brilliant job. And I've just felt that with him for a while now, that I just don't feel he's up to the standard. And especially in the Championship, those moments and those chances you have to take. That is the difference between getting a result in a game and not, and especially in the kind of form we're in at the moment, for me, that he's just not showing enough. And I still have concerns sometimes over work rate. I sometimes think he's really putting his all in. Others, I just think he's meandering around the pitch. I find him a little bit whiny as well, personally. There's a lot of things where I'm right at the end of my tether. And to be honest, as a striker, I think if we had more options there, and, for example, Kelman coming back into the mix, or Godden, who, with both of them, we don't really know where things are at. My view would be he needs to come out the lineup.
You know, the funny thing with him though is that, like, actually, if you look at his goal per game ratio, is actually pretty good. So I think he's played about 50 odd games, 60 maybe, something like that. I think that's right. And I'm pretty sure he scored nearly 20 goals. So but all those goals have been at a lower level, so they've all been in League One.
And he goes through spells. He goes through like really.
He
good...
scored some great goals last season.
Yeah,
like some really like very sort of composed finishes, and that's maybe where I think with strikers, I think, and especially a striker at the age of 22, it's a confidence thing. I think if he'd managed to bag a couple early on in the season, I think we'd see a different animal. But I think his confidence is quite low, and I think he's putting a lot of pressure on himself. And it doesn't help when the fans, and rightfully so, the fans are well within their rights to get on his back, because we need goals. And actually, when these chances pop up, we need someone there that's going to put the ball in the back of the net, and that's why we're so desperately missing Kelman, obviously, who unfortunately, just as he about to like get his first goal,
just as he scored his first goal,
he's now himself injured. But also, we've said it all season, but the sniffer dog, like, if without him, it's really like he would have been perfect for these scenarios.
My worry with him is, I think, from everything I'm hearing, I've heard lots of different bits and pieces, but I'm coming more away from the fact that he's going to be the revelation. I worry with the amount of what he's had to go through for that, whether he's even going to come back the same kind of player. What I think it probably highlights is there may be a need to get another type of player like that in January, an experienced head.
I don't care if it's a loan either, to be fair. Like, if we could get a quality, good sort of proven striker in that will just get us a few goals to sort of change those games where we're fighting hard, but we just don't have that end product at the moment. And it is really frustrating, actually, because we are creating a few quite good chances in games, and we're just not taking them. So we do desperately need that. And that chance that he missed in that game was pretty unforgivable in a way, I think.
Yeah, and one of the things, and coming away from that, 100%, and it does give you that option to go in at 1-1 and just reset and take that second half, as say, and I do so believe, especially at going to somewhere like Birmingham, as say, you just can't miss chances.
No, they're crucial.
They are so crucial. But what I thought of that first half and everything I saw as well was it felt a little bit more back to our roots of the early season, which is, yes, they had chances, yes, they were the team on top, but we did defend. We were resolute in what we were doing defensively, and a lot of what they were having to do was actually become pretty creative, breaks down, get pop shots, take long shots. That's what we had become so good at, and a numbers game is
frustrating teams.
Yeah, frustrating teams to the point, and it felt a little bit more back to our roots on that in this game. And I don't know how you felt watching it, but from everything I saw,
I think it had to be against a team like Birmingham away as well. That's the only really way you can approach it, because I think if you go sort of toe to toe with them, you're going to probably get opened up.
But I think that is what we've got as a character of a team. We're not going to go toe for toe, but what we've done recently is, I don't even think we've gone toe for toe. We just lost that. We had such a soft underbelly in certain
The high press in that game was more noticeable, to be fair, and that's why we created that chance for Leaburn, because Tanto just sprinted down the goalkeeper.
But that's what it is, getting a chance.
Yeah. But that's what we can do, and we've got players that have got the engine to do the sort of high press, and actually we did show that more in that game, and that probably meant that actually Birmingham didn't have as much time on the ball, and it made it harder for them to break us down, which is what we saw. And then eventually, obviously, in that second half, we ended up breaking them down, and Tanto with a lovely bit of skill.
Well, I was going to say, let's go into that second half then. So over to you.
Yeah, so I would say, like, we grew much more into the game as the game went on. Actually, it was at the moment when we got the goal, and Tanto obviously had been dangerous in that game. He created the chance for Leaburn, and he used his pace, his strength really well throughout the game. And I think the goal was a great example of actually him just taking on his man, and this is what creates the chances at this level, is having the players that aren't scared to just tap it round someone and take them on. And Clara's not exactly the most agile of players, and he was shown.
And it was so lovely just getting the revenge on him. He scores there and he gets made. But
that was
panic. as soon as he popped it through his legs and Tanto was off. Yeah.
But then Tanto's obviously got himself into the box and drilled a lovely little cross across the box, and then Campbell had literally just come on, and a player actually who's, like I said, had some stick, and rightfully so. He's had a few moments recently where fans, I think, have questioned his commitment. They've questioned really how much effort he's putting in, and actually he was desperate to just get that goal. He's not had a championship goal yet, and there it was. It popped up to him in the middle of the goal, and he's just levelled it in. His reaction to the goal was interesting. I don't know if you saw it. He sort of scored and sort of ran off away from the fans because the goal was next to where the Charlton fans were. And then Jones and a couple of the other boys have sort of tried to push him towards the fans. So I want to say, like, go and he's just put a little sort of arm up, and almost as if he wasn't that interested to sort of acknowledge the fans. And I think maybe he is getting a sense that like he might personally feel that he's getting a bit of a rough deal at the moment. I don't know. That's what it sort of came across as.
But I think that's part and parcel. And I think the difficulty when it comes to that is, yes, but the criticism in many regards to what I think there are a lot of fans who, and we've said this on previous episodes before, I think TC becomes a scapegoat for a lot of fans, and we seem to do it with players over the years. Not so much with academy products, which is why it surprised me with him. But when you look at it, over the course of this season, he's got, I think, 1 assist, 1 goal, one goal, 2 assists, something along those lines.
That's what's frustrating people is
and that's the end product. And I think everyone can see an exciting player. Now, the caveat I've always sat to this whole season is I find it very hard to judge a player like TC too hard when we are shoehorning him into every different position. We're putting him left wing back, we're putting him striker. Now, my honest opinion is there is no doubt about it. He is the most traditional left winger. And that is not what we have in our system. And then that makes it very difficult to completely judge him.
I agree with that. I think Jones actually made that point as well. And he sort of, I think probably, I mean, managers protect their players anyway, but I think he made a really good point of when we play Campbell in his most effective position, which is that far high up the pitch, left-hand side, we saw it actually against Middlesbrough. He went on one run where he absolutely rinsed someone and like creates havoc when he does that.
Why do you think then we don't do it more often?
I think because he's been dragged. You're right. Like he's been dragged around a little bit, and he's almost had to play that almost false 9. He's played in that wide right, but left. But then he's been dragged back to wing back a lot of the time. I don't know. Has he had enough time to sort of like establish himself? We also have to remember he is playing at a level above what he's used to. So he's gone up from League One, which he was really effective, obviously last season. But all of a sudden you're playing up against a much higher caliber of player. So that all of a sudden you're trying to front up or take on a man who's going to be a lot harder to beat.
Do you think? Because one of the things I find is that I think some of it also comes down to, and for this, you can look at it a positive, negative, however you want to look at it. But I also think some of it becomes down to Jones has a system and he wants his players to work that system, rather than sometimes when you have certain players in certain positions, you adapt your system to get certain players in. Whereas I find with Jones,
quite rigid.
Very much is rigid. If he wants a left wing back, he'll put Ibby Fuller, for example, in this game at left wing back. And rather than go, actually, no, do you know what, we'll change the system, we will play a left winger, which will make him more effective. He believes that actually shoehorning them into the formation is what gets the most out of that player, rather than playing to the strengths of the player. And I find that it's a really, really difficult one to know what is the right decision, because so much of our success has come from our system and how those players have got into it, and it doesn't matter who's playing there, but also some of our biggest problems have come from that. And it's a really difficult one to really narrow down and know what is, because I look at, for example, even Ibby Fuller in this game, I think there's very little you can judge of him when he's running up against a very experienced Patrick Roberts, he's not running up against where he is, but predominantly Roberts is running up against him in a defensive mindset. That's an incredibly tough ask of a player, especially at his age. And I thought, from what I saw, he did an all right job, but as well as you could maybe expect. And it's a bit like how we've looked at, for example, Ono Hernandez. How much of him can you judge when you're shoehorning him into this difficult position? Is there an answer to that, or do you just have to...
But you know why? This is why Jones, I think I've heard it, you know what Jones is like, he sort of repeats the same stuff regularly in his interviews, but he has regularly said, stick with us. And I think that is because he does see it as we are... like you said, shoehorning some players into positions they're not really used to playing. His thought process is once we got those players back, all of a sudden the puzzle will click together as it was before, and that's really why we were seeing our sort of the best of his system, because he had the right players playing in the right positions. And I think that is one thing that frustrates the fans actually, is that he is, like you said, quite rigid with he's going to stick with this formation, stick with this system. but not really adapt it to the players he has available,
Mm.
and that can be problematic. And I think that does then, and I think we saw it in the first half against Middlesbrough. It really did highlight the way they were able to like just cut us open, and sort of the amount of space it felt like they had on the wings and stuff. It was, um, but saying that, against Birmingham, I think the players that he brought in, and he obviously changed the team up because he brought Anderson and Fuller in from the start this time around, and that I think that has worked really nicely actually, and it has sort of brought a new impetus and a bit more energy and a bit more life into the team, which I think we needed.
And I'm really interested to see. I think the Brum away, as we say, is going to be one of your hardest away games you're going to go to. So even with the system and bringing certain players in, you're still going to be set up in a certain way. I think what I'm really excited to see now is the fact that he has broken that mould and seems to want to bring in other players now and be a bit more experimental. I'm very, very interested, especially with the running we've got, because we've got an incredibly, I think, important run
Few
coming up.
games, yeah.
How that will kind of sit into that, because I think finishing off that kind of second half to the Brum game, it seemed like they probably had the lion's share of chances. We maybe after the goal had a good spell where we were on top, but albeit we didn't create loads.
I think towards the end we were sort of
Resolute with one.
yeah. I wouldn't say hanging on either, because the chance that Gray had where he sort of ran through Bree, he sort of brushed him off and then hit a really lovely sort of whip shot and that hit the crossbar. Which, if that went in, that would have been a wonder goal, to be fair.
And I think he had a free kick.
And he had a free kick that was a bloody good save from Kaminsky. So, apart from those two chances, there wasn't anything drastic. Like, we held our own and we defended resolutely, which is what we are so used to seeing. I think it's nice to see that we can still do that, and not get overrun throughout the game. So, I think, and that's where maybe the changes in midfield made us a bit more sort of gave us a bit more bite, I think, in that middle.
Well, I think it summed up. It started to show me a little bit more of a return to what we were towards the beginning of the season. Because one of the things I saw, which I thought was just a really important stat to it, is actually when you look at the big chances in the game, it actually went 2-0 to us in regards to they didn't actually away from the header, but they had 24 shots in the game, but a lot of them were pop shots, were trying from distance because they were struggling to break us down, and we were becoming that really difficult team to play again. And I think it was really important to show the fans, a bit of confidence into the players that we can get back to being that team. And it's why even in this rotten run of form we've had, I still feel so confident about this season and the fact that we will do enough in there to stay up, and hopefully in a much more comfortable way than what it looks like now, because I do think we have that in us. And I think even the better teams in the league, we will be, and we will get back to it once we get a few more players back in, once we have a bit more ability to rotate and change systems with certain players and play styles, we will start to get back to what we were at the beginning of the season that saw results like 3-0 away to Ipswich.
But I think even when we were on our good run and we were sort of pushing fifth in the league at one point, I think the stats can be quite misleading, because even then our stats, we probably were still like being peppered with shots in games, but the difference was that we were blocking those shots, that they go down and registered as shots, but we were just defending really, really well. And I think that's something that we sort of pride ourselves on, is like our ability to sort of keep teams to sort of long range shots and stuff like that. So you can look at stats and you can say like, oh, you know, if Charlton keep playing that way, they won't be able to maintain sort of where they are in the league and that sort of thing. But actually, that's sort of how we've been consistent with that throughout the league. And the only thing that's really sort of hampered us is, one, the injuries, which has meant that we've had to play quite a few players out of position. And two, I think we've come up against a really tough run of teams that has really highlighted that maybe in that middle of the park is in my opinion, is where we have been. We've been, what's the word? We've been exposed a little bit. Yeah, I would say that's where I see it.
Yeah, and I also think as well, the most important thing from a run like this, and we have seen it under Jones before. We look at the League One season we went up last year. The start of the season wasn't great at times, and realistically, around this kind of time, we were really not where we wanted to be. But I think the biggest thing we got to see from it is that we do learn lessons. And what I've seen from, realistically, the Southampton game being the real crescendo of us looking, oh my God, we've kind of dropped all our everything we're about. We have slowly started to work back now towards a little bit more of our character. And if we can actually learn from what we've been through, that will reap rewards against some of what are the weaker teams. And there's not many weak teams in this league. You've only got to look at, I saw a video the other day, and it was quite incredible. You go Coventry, who absolutely spanked us, and then you look but someone like Oxford or Wrexham will have beaten them, but then someone else would have beaten Wrexham. It's the most freaky league, whoever you come up against. But as long as we learn the lessons, and once we're back to fitness, we take what we have learned and we move forward with it. I believe in the long run it will come good, and I think also this time has highlighted at quite a good time where we probably also do need to invest just a little bit more.
We will see it as well. I think January there has to be a few players brought in to give us a bit more depth. But what I will say is that performance against Birmingham, one, it gives the fans a break from the endless run of losses. That is a bloody important result, because one, to get a draw at St Andrews for any club in the Championship is a great result. So we've come away with a really, really good result. It stops the rot. So you stop that run, which could have really spiraled, and actually your confidence just takes a hammering after week in, week out losing. And also, what it does show is we're capable. It gives the players the confidence again of actually we're coming up against a very tough side in a cauldron of a stadium, which is renowned for being tough to get a result. We come away with a well-earned result.
I think a 1-1 draw away to Birmingham in our current situation, almost to a lot of fans.
It's
And I know
win, isn't it?
it felt like a win to me, and I know on the table that's not the case, but it also it bumped us just that little bit, a few places. It just, I think, as long as we can now,
it's psychological.
Yeah, as long as we can jump on top of that, but I think it just breaks that whole pressure as well. Albeit we've now got to follow it up with some really important games coming up. I feel like it has just released that little bit of pressure off the shoulders on it.
I think I was looking at the table, and I would probably look at the table at the end anyway. But if we do, and I'm jumping the gun a little bit, if we do end up getting the 3 points against Oxford, all of a sudden we sort of create a bit more of a gap again, and then it gives you that buffer to be like, okay, let's push on, and it gets you back on that winning mentality of, right, we're turning things around again. And that's what football is. It's all momentum. Every team is going to go on a bad run, on a good run. It's how you bounce back from it.
Yeah.
And I think Jones is actually very good and very level-headed at sort of when you hear his interviews, he never panics. He doesn't say like, oh, it's disaster zone. He knows that there's going to be moments in the season where these run of games are going to occur.
It's not his first rodeo, is it? Let's be honest. He's a very
seasoned
manager.
Yeah.
And you've only got to see how the players talk about him, etc. I mean, the realistic side is I still think there is that massive unity there, and he is the best man, without a doubt, to kind of pull us through. And as I say, it's the good old kind of adage of don't get too carried away when you're doing good, and also don't get too low when you're doing bad. And I think he is so good at that, and I feel very confident that we will soon start to see that turn of results. So
we definitely will.
I think moving on from here, one of the things kind of looking over the videos we wanted to just kind of get a feeler for is we normally will go through the individual performances. Now, we recently went through a period where that was very difficult because the performances were so terrible. We couldn't really go through. I think one of the things we just want to trial a little bit, and it's kind of an idea we come up with, is just picking some key players on both sides of the spectrum, really. So some players that we felt stood out in the game, including whether it was from the subs bench or whether it was from the starting lineup, and also players that we maybe felt were disappointing in the game, and going a little bit more into them rather than every single player and it getting too repetitive. So I think on that note, we'll start on the more positive side of things. So I think the first player to start on, and I think for me probably the most interesting one of the bunch in regards to, I wouldn't have thought 3 or 4 weeks ago would be having a conversation about this player, but is Roy Anderson at the moment.
Yeah, and I think like we already spoken about him a little bit, but he's come back with a new lease of life. And I think being out of the team and sort of not having a run in the team, it really gives you that hunger and desire to really want to sort of push on when you get that chance. You can really see that. And I think when he come on against Middlesbrough, the first thing he did was like put in a massive tackle. And I don't think you can underestimate those sort of moments in games where you might be 2-0 down, but that little that sort of moment of like a big hit, a big tackle, it gets the crowd up and it makes them realise actually these players are fighting for it.
We discussed it, and I can't remember, it was the game where Ibby Fuller came on and did the kind of roulette.
The skill.
Yeah, the skill. And the way that got the crowd going.
It makes a difference.
Incredible atmosphere. And I do think that 100%. And what he has brought, as I say, I've been impressed because he's a player I've been so heavily critical of. And if you ask me of that kind of lineup, I would never have predicted that Roy Anderson would start kind of making ways into the team. But you know what? From what is a small pool, and I do I do always hold reservation, a bit like I think I've been stung by Doherty this season because I think we went from poor to really positive and then dropping back into that mindset. But from what I'm seeing, actually, I feel that there is a place for him in that squad, albeit I don't think he's a guaranteed starter and not someone I see as our long term. But it's definitely a cog to our system this year, and certain games I'm really impressed with what I've seen, and maybe that some of that also is in the past that competition wasn't there, and now he knows when he has that opportunity, he needs to take it, or there's quite a good amount of competition in that centre of the park, and Jones is playing around with things at the moment, and maybe that pressure to have to perform is what's kind of bringing a little bit more out of him. I don't know.
Yeah, I just think like he is a talented player, and like like I know Jamaica's not exactly the most high level of nationalities to play for, but he regularly gets game time for them, and he obviously like people see a quality in him, and that quality, in my opinion, from Anderson is his work rate,
Mm,
his desire to like put in a crunching tackle, to really break the play up. And actually, that's the sort of player we need right now because we need someone who's going to muck in and really
mm,
actually like put their sort of neck on the line a little bit.
mm,
And he's come in and done that. And I think fair play to him because he could have come in and really like shrunk and sort of almost like just been another one that sort of looked as if he was hiding a little
mm,
bit.
mm.
And he's come in and actually said, right, I'm going to take this opportunity with both hands. And the fans see that as well. That's the other thing is that where other players they might think are shirking a little bit, they can definitely see that Karoy is actually stepping up. That's what we want to see as fans, is them
Mm,
putting their bodies on the line, and that's what you're getting.
mm.
So really impressed actually.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Mm.
I think moving on to the second one, and it's the only other one of the starting lineup I think that we kind of wanted to highlight, but someone who I've been a little bit concerned of over the season because I'm not sure I'd seen what I wanted to out of him, but looked like these were the kind of games where he shows glimpses of actually what he's about and the kind of dangers he can bring is Tanto.
Really, really good game, and actually we have been critical of him at times, and I think we've sort of argued that he's still very raw and that he's still young. He's played all his football at the League One sort of level.
And I think he even showed it. I think it was in the Middlesbrough game where I'm pretty sure towards the end of the game he was in on goal. My worry with him is I worry with him as a out and out striker because I do worry about his finishing. And in the Championship, where we talk about having to be really clinical on chances, I just feel he's very erratic and he almost seems more difficult. I think if he's in one on one, I don't have much confidence.
I like him. I like him on the sort of the wide right.
And that's what I kind of like. And I think that's what I saw from what I saw of the game. I think it's maybe finding the position that works for him. And where we talk about, I think out on the wings, you have a little bit more freedom to not be as clinical, albeit you still have to be statistically. You get a little bit more freedom to run. And I think what he has got is he's got an
Lightning,
incredible burst of pace. And
lightning
I
fast,
don't think he's the fastest player in the world over like a really long
short
distance. But
burst.
a short burst past a player alongside just a physical unit.
He bullies people,
Yeah.
and actually he showed exactly what he's good at, and actually fronting a man up, he's popped it through Clara's legs and absolutely rinsed him. And then he's also had the composure then to drill the ball across the box. So he clearly can play that sort of role.
Mm.
And actually, you're right. Like using that sort of burst of pace to really sort of frighten the defence is what we need at the moment. Because what it does is it shows that we do have that attacking threat.
Mm.
And when we do get the quality balls into the box, we will score goals.
Mm.
Um,
And I think I see him more as like the almost what TC does, which is that striker out to wing. I see him more as that. And what I'd actually be really excited to see when I saw the highlights of everything in that game, I thought I would love to in future see a Tanto Kelman starting lineup
mm,
because I think that is one with a bit of kind of playing together and working out how each other play could really bring some
yeah,
dangerous sides.
yeah, I
But
agree with that. I
also,
think that could
what
work.
could come into that attacking side once we're back to full fitness? The fact that you have on that slight wing side that is if TC side isn't working, you could have a Kelman, you could have a Lieburn, who obviously we've had conversations about, but you have Fuller. You have
Mm.
then some exciting ways in
Dangerous.
which you can go about games. And I think if we can just add another dynamic of player, and that probably is that experience kind of I don't know if journeyman striker, but definitely someone with more experience who knows kind of a little bit more of what they're doing. I think you have actually got an attacking unit there that could start to cause some problems to teams and maybe unlock some of those difficulties that I think we've got in this side, which is predominantly creativity, isn't it?
Yeah, and it also gets us having players, excuse me, having players of that sort of style of play gets you up the pitch, and
Mm,
that's what we need as well. Because at the moment, it has felt a little bit as if we got bogged down a little bit battling in the middle of the park, and actually having those outlets on the left, right, and the pace up the top of the pitch is only going to be a good thing. It's going to
mm.
create chances and get us away from our own goal. So really, I'm really impressed with his performance in the Brum game, and I'm hoping that he can push on now and
Mm.
actually sort of.
A bit of a
I
springboard.
mean, Oxford's a great one for him because it's hopefully a chance for him to really sort of show what he can do again.
Mm.
So
And I think I'm excited about seeing with him being coached under Nathan Jones, who gets the most out of every
we'll
player.
see improvement
Yeah, and
week
I
in
think
week
seeing
out.
the improvement, I'm really excited what the future holds for him.
So
Because I think he is starting to now show signs of what may be my frustration. I want him to have impact on games. I want him to get you off your seat. And I think that was the first game where I've really seen. I know we had the Sheffield United game where he got the winner right in the last minute, but I don't feel like up to now, away from a few moments of kind of bursting down a wing, a little run, I thought it seemed like the most consistent over a longer period of
yeah, it
time
was a good
performance.
overall
Yeah,
performance for him.
which I think we've seen
100%.
moments of that up to now. So I think the final two that we kind of wanted to highlight going off there are both coming off the subs bench. One that is quite an obvious one, I suppose, to it would be TC's impact coming off the bench.
Yeah, like obviously he got his goal, and like I think it was really important for him to get a goal. Just to one give him that sort of get that monkey off his back
Hmm.
because it's one of those things. It was like the same for Kelman. I know TC's not a striker, but it's still important for him to get goals. So to get that goal was massive, and also just to get the fans off his back a little
Hmm.
bit, and sort of like it did feel a little bit like I say with his celebration, that it was almost a little bit of a to the fans sort of I'm good enough and I can do it.
I also think, and I hope this does to Jones, is that I've always felt with TC with Jones is that he almost seems fearful of dropping him because of the impact he has, but actually showing that a lot of what TC's traits and his best qualities can have such a devastating impact off the bench. And I hope that maybe it starts to show that dropping him onto the bench and playing him from that role isn't necessarily always. You look at so many players over the years who actually have had greater impacts from the bench sometimes. And I think there's certain teams where definitely the way forward is for him to be starting because they've got slower wing backs or whatever. But
Mm.
actually, there's maybe certain games where his most
Well,
lethal and explosive side, when a player's tiring, a player like TC coming on must put the fear of God in.
it's assessing it game by game, I think, and I think that's maybe where we've gone a bit wrong with Campbell down the line. Is we've really run him into the ground a little bit, and I know again Jones will argue that it's been forced, like we haven't really had the options, but I actually disagree with that. I think we have got the options, and we've sort of proven it a little bit in that game. It's like we have got players that can fill that gap. And even if you're like playing an Apter on the left, or there's players that you can adapt a little bit to sort of give him a break. And actually, you're right. Like his pace, his threat off the bench is bloody dangerous.
Well, we
And
saw in the same regard Apter when he came on against Middlesbrough. Those
yeah,
kind of players, those explosive
they're
players,
ready to go, aren't
they're so dangerous coming
they?
on in the latter parts of the game. And I think last season, when we only had TC and Small, I could see the conversation about why we would never want to drop them because really, when we looked at the depth behind, there was nothing.
Yeah,
Whereas this season, I don't feel like that's the case. And I feel
no,
there is the opportunity to maybe give someone else an opportunity. And that's not even down to performances. Look, if he's absolutely red hot on form, yeah, 100%. But
mm,
sometimes actually give him that break and let him come on and make an impact. That might be the difference between him getting a goal or not, or his head kind of dropping in games. Because I think what I've seen with TC is there definitely is a frustration in a lot of games when he's just playing 60 minutes after 60 minutes and that head's going down. Sometimes taking him away from that limelight, taking him away from the criticism, and giving him that opportunity from a slightly different vein. I think it's important, and I hope that maybe to Jones that does maybe show it is a possibility because I feel like up to now it does seem like even through tough times he's just pushed him through it.
yeah. I'd also say as well, like, I'm not on board that sort of he's not good enough boat. I don't. I think he is. I think he has got the ability, and I think that is the big frustration from all of the Charlton fans is the ability's there, and a lot of the time we don't see his full potential. And I think that is what frustrates fans with Campbell because he's got that ability, that raw talent
Mm.
to really push on and actually show how good he really is. And that's why, like, those moments where he gets goals or where he rinses his man and puts the ball across for a tap in, they're the moments that we expect to see more and more from him because we know he can do it. And I'm hoping that we see more and more of it. And I think you're right. Like maybe dropping him occasionally is not a bad thing.
Mm.
So seeing him come off the bench and get a goal does prove that he can be a good impact player as well as a starting player for us. And I think there maybe is a lesson in that to a degree, is that maybe we should rotate a little bit more on that side of things and see how it goes. Whether we see that happen is another matter. Because like
Time
you
will
say,
tell. Or hopefully it's a catalyst that he starts red hot form and
yeah.
we don't need to have.
Which and again, if that's the case, then
you never know, do you? Yeah, he's
that's the
definitely, as
case,
you say, he's definitely got raw.
we'll take that.
Definite raw talent there. That there is a hell of a player there if he can tighten up on certain things. So the final one of these, and I'm going to leave this very much to yourself because I think it's someone who surprised me and having not watched the game kind of all the way through. But the final one that you wanted to highlight, you felt was Rankin Costello.
Yeah, I think with him, like we've barely seen anything of him, and I think we felt a bit sorry for him at times, sort of in
I
that.
think the conversation was not in a horrible way. Why did we sign him?
Yeah, but I think there was always a reason we signed him, and actually, if you talk to Blackburn fans, they bloody loved him actually at times, and I think the reason for that is that he has got a real ability to actually be a very good quality player at that level, and what we saw in that game, and there was a moment where he turned into Lionel Messi. Honestly, he skilled about 3 players, chipped the ball over someone's leg, and he drilled it back across goal, and actually it went to their defence, and the play broke up, but. That was a little insight into what he is actually capable of, and he's clearly like a talented player. And I think like he was brought in predominantly to be that sort of break-up man, the defensive mid-style terrier. Although I know he did play a lot of his career at like sort of right back, I think as well.
He's one of those. He
utility man.
He reminds me of
Milnery sort of.
Whenever I used to play footy man, Emre Can, you'd always get him up and he'd have green everywhere on footy.
He's
man.
definitely like
he's one of those players. He's a bit like almost like how you look at Milner, for example. How it's like, okay, I need a whole plug there. That's it. I think the thing what I've found a bit confusing of him as a signing is I feel like we have had times this season where we need a whole plug there. And you think, okay, that's what we signed him for, and we just haven't seen him. We've seen him for final minutes, and
I'm not sure if it's like been down to his fitness, and it's taken him a bit longer to get up to full fitness, or I don't know. I don't know quite what it is.
Jones has just felt there's other players.
Yeah, exactly, and maybe he's found his time now where he's getting a bit more game time, and hopefully he's actually gonna sort of turn into quite a valuable player in the squad. And I think we saw glimpses of that in that game, and that's why I just wanted to pick him out a little bit because he had a moment in that game that really sort of made me sit up and think, actually, this guy's got something, and maybe we could start to see a bit more from him. And I'm hoping that's the case because if he can bring that to his game and like start dribbling past people, then that's what we need. So
no, definitely. So I think when it comes to negatives, I think there was only one name that we could really come to. I think we've already touched upon, and I don't want to beat him with a shitty stick, but realistically, right, wasn't that funny? But I think the one really is Miles Lieburn, and I think it's a figure who is cutting a frustrating figure at the moment. Now, I think we've gone over in so far what the main kind of gripes are towards him, and I think this section here and the discussion point around him is where do the options lie on where you go? Because my problem is, and I've seen fans who are saying, okay, start Tanto with TC maybe. My biggest problem is, no matter what I think of Lieburn, he is the most natural of, in that situation, maybe didn't show in this game, but of goal scorers. And my worries over Tanto is that he is so erratic on that side. Lieburn probably feels that mould more. And I think, are we playing him more just because we have to at the moment? Because who is the backup? What decision do you make there? Who do you?
When we started the season, we had a pretty nice glut of strikers, and I was thinking, actually, who the hell are we going to choose? Because we got a really good choice of. All of a sudden, then Godden it carries an injury through to the new season. Kelman gets injured, and then all of a sudden you're looking pretty light up top. And my only, I know people get frustrated with Lieburn, but what I will say is I do think that he has been given a bloody tough task. And the reason I say that is I think the way that we've sort of, especially in games where we've been struggling, we've ended up resorting to the Gillespie cross midfield ball. We've talked about this loads of times, but where it's sort of aimlessly kicked up to Lieburn with very little around him. And it's a funny one, actually, because when I was at the Borough game, my boss was there and he's a Leeds fan, and he obviously hasn't really seen Charlton play. And he was like, oh, who's your big man up front? Like, he's got a really good touch. Like, he looks quite quality. That's someone that's not seen him play. clearly sees that he's got something. Like he's a quality. Like
But I think every Charlton fan knows he's got something. And sometimes he gets on the ball the way he dribbles with the ball. He's for a big man. He definitely has got, like, there is a raw talent in there that is really, really talented. I just think we see it in spits and spurts. And I
do you not
don't
think
know.
that's like an age thing though? He is only 22 years old, and I
But
think,
that's where I think he should have gone out on loan by now. And I
yeah,
know in League One there's an argument to say
but that's not on
we're,
him though,
we're
is
the
it?
kind of club. No, but that's where I think, are we sometimes, and I think what Charlton have done over the years, are we sometimes failing some of our youth players? Because I look at, for example, we did it with Dan Carney to a certain extent. We brought him in, we kind of ticked and tapped him around the squad. We now send him out on loan to League Two for a season, and I think he's the third top scorer in the league. Mika and Bick is doing a really good job there. And I think sometimes actually giving them that experience to be the lead man at a few levels down, to give them that confidence, to show them how maybe they need to hone in certain skills and what you learn from some of those lower divisions. I worry with Lieberman, we've always just, he's always had that ability to maybe eke towards the starting lineup. I also do worry with him. He had a really bad period of injuries, and whether that has also had a bit of an impact on his development, I'm just not convinced. And I think there's one experiment that I would like to see in that position, and I don't think it's going to happen. But I would be really, really intrigued to see, maybe just to see what would happen with it, because I think I've seen some of his kind of finishes and what he's about is potentially even giving Fuller a chance up there.
Yeah, you could do.
I'd really be tempted with a laugh playing the more kind of channel or TC, and see what Ibby Fuller can maybe do. Because I just think
the other one I was thinking was Nibs might even be able to be pushed up a bit higher.
maybe.
Like I don't know, but
But then that would be probably behind. You're probably in that system. You're playing maybe Nibs and Carey
yeah,
behind a Tanto,
you need
and
like
you're hoping those players will maybe get in behind. But I don't know. I think it'd be Fuller. I'd love just to see it. And I don't know if it's. I don't know enough maybe throughout his youth development whether it is positionally what he's played. But I just think it's something. I say no one at the moment is kind of taking the ball by nights with that. And what I think with that is he's the kind of player who might pick up the ball and just dribble past, got that burst of pace, and maybe just plays without the fear. Because I wonder with that striker role at the moment, is there so much pressure to score goals in that squad that everyone's just kind of faltering and getting a little bit underperforming.
Going back to Liebern though, I my opinion on it is I don't think he was ever seen as the spearhead of our attack at the beginning of the year. He wasn't. I don't think if Jones had his fully fit squad, he's not thinking, right, Liebern, we're going to work the team around Liebern. In my opinion, like he might have done in League One. That's what we did, and we did use Liebern a lot as our sort of target man, and he got a lot of goals, and like I say, he scored some bloody good goals, and he was effective. The difference is he stepped up a level, and all of a sudden he's gone from League One defenders to Championship defenders. Who doesn't matter how big you are, they're going to bully you at times, and they're going to make it difficult for you. And my other thing is I do feel quite sorry for him at times because I think he gets isolated, and I think
that's something we could say, and we said it about. It's a bit like beginning of last season with Godden, for example. The realistic side is it's very tough sometimes to criticise strikers in our team when we are so creatively inept sometimes, and we just lump it up. For me, I've got to a turning point with that. Where yes, I do accept that causes issues and flaws. There's just other parts of the game that I'm getting really disappointed about as well. Where I don't know. I think he definitely needs a little bit of a break from the starting lineup.
I think the only time that's going to happen is one, if we're a bit more experimental with who we start playing up in the middle, or when we reach January and we bring someone in that can actually be a bit more of a natural striker who's going to give him a bit of a break and actually, change things up a little bit. And I think it's going to be interesting. January's an interesting time for us. I think we're going to need to bring a couple of heads in to really sort of freshen things up a little bit. We need it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think that sums up and puts a nice little kind of curtain closed on the Brum game. What it does mean is moving into what I would probably describe as so far the most important game I think so far this season, which is with Oxford at home.
I think with how sort of desperate we are for 3 points,
it's a perfect opportunity, isn't it? It's a home game where we have, even with some of the performances recently and some of the results, home is where we have had such a fortress up against a team that realistically, when you look at that relegation scrap, are going to be a team that are going to be well in and around. And I think the biggest thing with it is a victory against them, I think will take us I think it's 8 points clearer than with a game in hand. And to me, that is such a statement and such a blanket that realistically we're desperately crying out for at the moment, because we have. No doubt about it. We have started free falling through that table.
Also,
And it has now that early kind of, I think any of the, which I think most Charlton fans were quite realistic on it, the playoff talks and all of that kind of side, as much as there's always that
well, we had a right to get
hopeless
carried away.
romantic. You get carried away, but we are now starting to, game by game, get dragged more into it. And we are now in that conversation of the relegation.
But the other reason that Oxford's important is we've also got Portsmouth and Blackburn coming up, and they're three massive games because they're all directly below us. And if we can get away from that with, well, ideally 9 points, but a solid point return, like you say, we almost push ourselves up into that middle table again, and it creates that buffer between the bottom half of the table. So Oxford are not, and there's no team that I see come up and think that's going to be a walkover. Like, it's not going to be a piece of piss.
I think you'd be naive that in their last 5 games they've only got 1 win, but that 1 win was against Ipswich. So there clearly is a team there.
Like and also they're a championship side. Like there's nobody in that league, even Sheffield Wednesday, who are minus points and they've barely won any games. They're still a tough game.
They seem to keep games quite tight. I mean, last 5, Norwich away 1-1. 2-1 at home to Ipswich, lost 2-0 away to Swansea, 1-1 draw with Blackburn away, and a 2-1 loss to Preston at home. So clearly they keep games quite tight. So it'll be very interesting because that's something we do as well. So
I think
seems like it might be a fine margin.
I think what's going to be crucial in this game is us getting off to a good start. I think if we can get an early goal or even like a goal in the first half, settles the nerves down a little bit in the stadium, gives us license to sort of grow into the game. I think if we go 1-0 down, the crowd could get a bit twitchy. So I think it's really, really key that we get that first goal in the game.
Do you think must win? I think it is.
Yeah,
I think you
probably.
have to off the back of the results we've just had. And I also think to get that momentum, for me, a win against them would get us back on track to what we were kind of feeling before, which is, I think it gives us that kind of solid side. We'd then move a little bit up the table, but that buffer between us and the relegation zone would grow to a nice level again. And for me, it would just then give you that platform. I think especially going into other games, playing teams in and around, and for example the Norwich game, the Portsmouth game, the Blackburn game, I think it just gives you that boost going into them that we desperately need, because my worry is if you then don't quite pick up all 3 points there, I think if it was an away game I'd probably just about maybe take a draw, but I think being at the Valley as well, for me,
no, I think you're right. I think we everyone's going there expecting
it's got to be a statement, hasn't it?
We've got to do it.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't really care how we do it.
No,
I don't care if we do what Norwich did the weekend and whack it in with our hand. I really don't care how we get there, but I think it's just so essential we get a win there and just get that confidence back into the squad, building off what has been a, albeit still quite negative, but slow building process to getting back to winning ways.
Of course, it just gives we've come off the back of a really hard fought draw that we've already spoken about. Has come across as a very good result. To build on that again is just going to build the momentum back, and I think that's really key because momentum in football is massive. I think if we can start getting some results, then we start pushing back up, and all of a sudden it looks a lot brighter. So Jones will know how big a game this is, and the players will also know, and they're going to want to be able to sort of push themselves away from the relegation zone. So they'll be up for it. They'll be bang up for it, and I think hopefully we'll see a really good performance and 3 points. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think probably one of the interesting ones going into it, do you foresee that we'll look at a very similar starting lineup? I know there's always the difficulty because Jones will always say every player who's injured is another week closer. So whether there's any injured players who might be back in the mix, I think there is talk of maybe 1 or 2 in there who might be back available.
If they are there, they'll probably just be on the bench right now. So I think we'll probably see a similar lineup. I think we'll probably see Anderson again. He got man of the match in that last game, and I think he's brought something different. I think we'll see him in there. I think we'll probably see Fuller start again. Whether we see TC come back in, because he's obviously come on and scored the goal.
Do you think exciting new signing Russelon?
I'd like to see.
Yeah,
but I want to see him.
I have to admit, I thought it's one of the most bizarre ones because we haven't done a video, I don't think, since we signed him, and I found it quite funny that there was a big thing about how he's available for the next game, but he still hasn't signed. He still hasn't played yet.
Yeah, no,
I was expecting to see him maybe.
I did hear though, like he hasn't played a game since like March or something.
Hell of match fitness.
He needs to go up to fitness. But
I wonder if we will see in any capacity though, because that is definitely that left wing back role freeing up some of those players who have been dropping into there. Really, we've really been shoehorning them in. It would be
actually it's probably the type of game that they might drop him into, which would be good if he does.
Yeah. be interesting to see. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so very, very well. I'm very optimistic going into that game, and I just hope, as say, it's that real statement of intent that we're back. Bad runs it behind us, and it really sets us on that good platform going into the next game. So, before we finish up there, because I think this has probably been maybe even a bit longer than normal.
Yeah.
We've had a lot to cover. We will look at the league table, which I'll bring up now. Yeah, a little bit worse than when we probably last did this, but we're now sitting in 17th. No, I still think there's positives there. We're still 5 points above the relegation zone. As I say, a victory, and that's why I think it's so important, will take us back up to that 7-8 point buffer, depending on what happens to other teams. And for me, just getting that breathing space again, because we are, as much as I do not feel we will get relegated this year, the closer you do start teetering towards it, it does bring a few nerves in. And I think especially, as I say, breaking that run of form and just getting a bit more positivity around, you just want to start to peel away from it again.
Yeah, like I keep going back to the word momentum, but like if you keep losing, then naturally you start flirting with the relegation zone.
mm.
It starts getting twitchy,
Mm.
and that's exactly what we want to avoid. So it's a key game coming up, and that table still doesn't look so bad. Like we're at the start of the season. If you said at this stage,
I think
this
if
is
you'd
where we're
average,
at.
I think the funny thing is, if you'd averaged our games rather than the real string of results, if
Mm.
you'd actually taken that and just kind of plopped a win, then a loss, then a draw, and done it in a slightly different order, we'd
Well,
probably
points per game.
we'd probably be really happy with where we are. I think it's just the nature of such a kind of cataclysmic going from there, dropping down with like 5 losses in a row. That's more where the fears come, because actually that table's still looking quite nice for how a lot of Charlton fans maybe felt towards the beginning of the season. I'd be pretty happy sitting there.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like anything above relegation zone is
Hmm.
an absolute win for us this season. So, which we will be at the
We
end
will
of the
be.
season. So.
Keep telling ourselves that we will be. We can't go back to League One. Oh,
No.
the doldrums.
Nope.
Okay, well that's where we will finish up on this one. So next one we will be back to normal. So upload next Monday. And coming into that episode as well, we'll release over what our schedule is over Christmas. We will be bringing you a video for every single game, which will be exciting. We're just trying to work out at the moment what that schedule will look like. So yeah, so hopefully some exciting Christmas period coming up. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.